Well, good evening and welcome to Storybearer Sessions. My name is Phil Knox. It's Wednesday night. It's 8 o'clock. Thank you for joining us. It's brilliant to have you with us. Storybearer Sessions are about encouraging, inspiring and equipping us to be able to share our faith in this coronavirus moment. Storybearer Sessions are brought to you by myself and Rachael from the Evangelical Alliance. We want to equip you, inspire you to be the very best you can be at sharing your faith with your friends in this moment. Wherever you're joining us from, if you're joining us live, please drop us a note in the comments to say where you are, what you're doing on this fine Wednesday night. It's great to be here with Rachael, my co-host. Rachael, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, Phil. Thanks. Yeah, I think the sun makes it all the better, doesn't it? And what a fabulous bank holiday weekend we had. So, yeah, all is well. But I just want to add my welcome to all of you who are watching. Thanks to so many who've engaged with us over the last couple of weeks. This is the third of our Storybearer sessions. And as Phil said, we just hope that this time will be meaningful, it will be impactful as we journey together, just looking at actually how, particularly in this time and season, as Phil said, we can just journey together to be exploring different elements of faith and how we connect that in a really impactful and relevant way to the people around us. So again, as we've said in other weeks, and thank you to those who've joined us before. If you're new today, then even better to have you with us as well this evening. But it's for people who, for many who might say, actually, they love their friends dearly or their family, they're praying for them, but actually when it often comes to getting the words out and exploring how to say that, then actually there's just a sticking point or a nervousness or a lacking of confidence. If that's you, as it has been for many of us and maybe still is, then these sessions are for you. It's equally for people who find that actually sharing faith is really simple and easy, and you're an evangelist at heart, then we welcome you with us as well. So really, as Phil said, we'd love you not only to connect with us on these Wednesday nights for the next half hour or so. We'll be chatting. We have a wonderful guest with us in a little while, but also do connect with us during the week. We have our Great Commission site on eauk.org, and we'd love you to join with us on the Facebook page as well and put your chat and your messages to us as this time goes on together. So last week, Phil, I'm going to ask you a question. Last week we left, by week one, we were talking about how to be really intentional in praying for our friends, you know, whether it's the 1, the 2, the 5 or the 20. Last week with Jay John and Sarah Yardley, we looked at actually how to connect the dots, how to connect stories and use those opportunities. What would you say? How's it been going for you over the last week or so? Have you had any opportunities come up where you felt that nudge or that prompt from God to actually share some element of faith with those around you? Or how's that been for you?
Yeah, Rach, the real kind of headline, as you know, my life really is that my mum is really poorly with cancer. It's a really sad and hard time for us that the cancer is no longer treatable. And if I'm honest, I'm really struggling, and it's a really difficult time. And so what's happened as a result of that is that lots of friends, both of faith and not of faith, are kind of reaching out to me, and that's providing all kinds of opportunities, really, alongside that wonderful thing of having friends with you through these tough times. But for me, faith in these moments, faith has to make a difference at these times. And I think what I've been observing is others seeing in me and my family and my mum and all those connected to her the difference faith makes. And the funny thing is, I don't really feel like I am as positive or as I don't feel like I am as peaceful as people are seeing in me. But the truth is, and I think this is really pertinent for tonight's session, is even if we don't feel like our lives have a difference, people do see that difference because Jesus lives in us. And so in all these examples, I think particularly kind of, 2 texts from people in particular over the last week where people have said, I can't believe how peaceful you are or how positive you are in these situations. And in these and other examples, I don't always say, oh, that's because of Jesus. But in some, there have been moments where I've been able to kind of have the opportunity to express some of the hope that we have and some of the peace that God gives me in these moments. How about you, Rachel, for back there last week?
I think for me, I think what I did in a really practical way was, again, just with that renewed prompt of praying for the 5. I took a small, almost like a business card size, and actually rewrote my list that has been on my phone and in other places, and actually stuck it right to the side of my desk. Like most people, spending a lot more time at home at my desk on Zoom calls and so on. So put that really front and central, and have clocked that and prayed for those people a lot more in the last week. And again, I think, like you, just recognizing the opportunities where simple conversations about very real and often very trivial things, just making the most of those to just drop in those little nuggets about maybe anxieties or decisions that we've got at the moment. For example, I'm sure, like a lot of people watching, maybe I've got a year 6 son, so he's one of the few who could be called back to school next week, and in the midst of that decision making and some anxiety about what he could be going into or whether we keep him at home, just to mention that to a few friends, and just the prayer around that for wisdom, really. So it's just those nuggets, isn't it, to drop in and make real what is actually faith on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, a couple of times those opportunities have come up too. Just going back to what you said, Phil, and again, obviously today we'll be looking at one of the chapters from your book. Again, encouraging people to look at that, because the messages are so key and so prevalent for us at this time. They really are, Phil, I'm not just saying that. But obviously, as you know, what we're looking at this evening is the idea of how it's not just about our words and what we say to people, is it? But it's also about how we live. And just picking up on what you said there, and I've certainly found this in my life as well, that people who don't maybe have faith, but they do really watch us as Christians, don't they? And like you said, people may be watching you, whether they're recognition of it or not, but watching how you go through these challenging times.
Yeah.
And you mentioned in the book, again, some funny stories around how in teenage years experience, or even conversations about sex before marriage and so on, it's been able to lead you into just genuine, natural conversations about faith and beliefs and so on. How about more recently? Is there anything, again, where you've found, aside from the ones that you've already mentioned, in terms of looking at not just words, but also our actions and how they sync or tie up? Anything that springs to you or comes to mind, rather, more recently, that actually shows that word and action and faith lived out in your life?
Yeah, I think it's to do with the parallel that I shared about with Mum, really. I think these times are hard, not just for me on a very personal level, but for us as a whole society and a world, compared to how we would have been 6 months ago. And just want to draw on a few things that I've noticed, really. First of all, I really do think these times are causing people to turn to Jesus. There's a guy just who lives just up the road, a neighbour who put on his Facebook today, when this is all over, I'm going to church. I'm going to start going to church. I was able to get in touch with him and start, encourage him to join us on Sunday on our Zoom at church. I think conversations happening really naturally. I think people are always talking about how they're getting through lockdown. And I've had loads of conversations where just naturally, because people are talking about how we're going to get through this, how faith brings a real peace and a real hope and a real sense of perspective. And I think because everyone's talking about it, we're able to talk in a really non-cringe, non-weird way, and that can open up really great conversation. And so yeah, I think all of that tells me the stories. And so, Rach, you were talking a bit before about the kind of the cost you often feel with kind of living in sync with kind of life and words. Can you open up a bit more about that? Can you expand a bit on that kind of cost thing?
Yeah, I think from my experience, and as obviously tonight we're talking a little bit about how living distinctively is both important, uniting words and actions and how you live it out. But yeah, I think, as I was saying to you earlier, Phil, I think I've felt it on a few occasions in my adult life, particularly, and amongst friends, that the cost can sometimes become quite apparent when, even within a friendship group, actually people might like and respect you, but I've felt sometimes there's a sticking point of something that feels maybe quite uncomfortable, or that the friendship isn't quite as natural a click. And sometimes, as people will know, that can often feel quite sad or quite difficult, and you wonder kind of, what is it? Is it me? Did I do something, say something wrong? And I think as the years have gone on, I've come to recognise, like I said, only in 1, 2, 3 occasions, but where actually I think what it is I've realised that I don't think it's about me personally, but it's what they see in me and also what I stand for. So on a couple of occasions I can think of particularly that I did have to recognise that actually this is costly to me, because sometimes it hurts to be kept a little bit at arm's length. but actually came to recognize that I think what the people saw in me was something maybe that triggered something in them, where maybe they'd been hurt by the church or hurt by other Christians or had some experience. And so it was simply by actually what I to them represented actually flagged something and was a trigger. And of course, anyone that you say in the book as well, you know, we all want to be liked, we all want to, you know, and on those occasions, well, it's where I've heavily invested in friendships and yet still felt kept at slight arm's reach. So yeah, I think for me, it's just been a learning curve in some of those instances to realize that actually living, hopefully messing up at times, but, you know, living in a godly way, trying to live distinctively and differently sometimes does have that cost, which can be hard. But equally, then there comes a choice, doesn't there? And the choice is either you compromise and you dilute who you are and how you live those beliefs out, or you have to stick firm to it, and actually the cost comes with that as well. So it's a challenging one. But
it's interesting, isn't it? How it can almost be a kind of, the way we live and tell our story can both attract people, but also kind of cause that reaction in people. That's great. You highlight that, Rachael. It's brilliant. And which brings us nicely on to kind of our theme for this evening. Where we're talking about the story that we tell with our lives, both individually but also corporately, and just brilliant to have someone with us tonight who brings those two together. I first met Les Isaac OBE at an event last year, which was about knife crime in London, and the event was amazing. It was held in Trafalgar Square, and what happened at the event was there was both this real lament for what was happening at the time in London, but also telling through the stories that were told there, the positive difference that Christians were making. But also it was not only the stories that were told by people's lives, it was also with the words from the stage, proclaiming unashamedly the life of Jesus. So Rach, why don't you introduce Les Isaac to our guest this evening?
Absolutely. Well, welcome, Les. We're thrilled to have you with us. Thank you so much for your time and joining us. To those of you watching at home, Les Isaac OBE, as Phil just said, is the CEO of Ascension Trust and originator and founder of Street Pastors back in 2003, I believe, Les. So welcome to you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you live, what have you been up to today as we continue in our lockdown life?
Well, thank you very much. Great to be with you all tonight and to share. And I must say, before I say anything, that actually Phil really inspired me and the crowd at Trafalgar Square. I was looking, we were planning it, and we said we want someone in that event who's going to really preach the gospel. And spoke to Gavin, and Gavin said, look, you know, my man Phil will do it. And I was praying, look, I don't know this guy. And we had everyone there, the bishop, the cardinal, the archdeacon, everybody was there. And Phil came up, and let me just tell you, man, I was so blessed. This young guy came up and he preached. Man, I wanted to be in my 20s, 30s again. You know?
That's very, very kind, Les.
But our senior pastor, you know, I go to a Pentecostal church, and our senior pastor, this black woman, and she said, boy, the young boy preached like a black man.
Like it.
means an awful lot.
So Phil came to Pentecostal. So it was a real blessing. But I've been, it's been interesting because I started this period in Ghana, and the borders were closed. My wife and I were there. I was trying to go through a sabbatical, and it came to an abrupt end because country lockdown, and we spent nearly 2 weeks trying to get out of the place. And I came back, and you know, everything had come to a standstill, and it was about really recognizing that it was like the tectonic plate has shifted, coupled with a tsunami, coupled with an earth, with what we call a hurricane. And it's as if we're all trying to grab something that we can't hold.
Yeah.
And it was interesting that I began just to look at scriptures again, and I began to just see that actually for the Christian, for the believer in Jesus, it's well. And the scripture that really came to me was that scripture in Acts, where it speaks in Acts chapter 17 and verse 28. For in him we live, we move, and we have our being. And it's not about the money, the things that we do, the ministry, quote unquote, but it's about our position in Jesus. And I've been sort of using that just to say to people, mate, I don't know about lockdown for you, mate. We may be locked in, but we're not locked out of the kingdom.
Right.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
And this really, I love praying. I'm a man of prayer. But, this just means that the 2 hours that I spend commuting, that's Bible study, that's prayer, and I could wait upon the Lord. And I believe that the number one thing that this should be doing for us is to draw us closer to Jesus so that we could understand our position as children of God in the 21st century. Because I believe with all that we are doing, the food bank, the street pastor, and all the things that we're doing, practical things, I think we will miss it if Jesus is not central.
Right.
We'll miss it if we're not seeing the opportunity to be explicitly, overtly Christian.
If I can just interject that, because I totally agree. I think, and I don't know about you, I'm an eternal optimist, but I do think things are going to get a lot worse before they're going to get better in our society with the economic tsunami that's probably going to follow all of the challenges that we're facing in these initial first few months of COVID. One of the things I remember you saying was that you didn't feel the church was very good at PR. But one thing I really admire about you is it's about the actions that we do, but also the words that we say, and how if ordinary people like all of us who just want to see our friends come to faith during this time, how do you think that works for us on a very kind of individual level during this time, in terms of both how we act and what we say during this time?
I think it's very interesting because people are ever more inquisitive today. Yeah. And people want to know today what makes us tick. Why is it that we're not anxious, we're not worried? And I think for me today, it's important for us to do things, but it's important for us to be ready to say to people, mate, I live in this city, I live in this country, but here's where I'm drawing my strength from.
Yeah.
It's not announcements the government makes, it's about what the word that Jesus says. Now, I've been really blessed by the church, the way the church has rolled its sleeves up and it's getting involved. I've got guys around the country, they're delivering food, they're helping people picking up prescription. They're doing all kinds of practical things. So
is that what street pastors are doing now? Because obviously street pastors has been a huge part of your work. Is it because presumably street pastors isn't quite happening in the same way?
Well, yep. Many of them, they're saying they've never been so busy because the local authorities are asking them to go out there, help people, remind people about social distancing because they know they have this touch, to people. They're not police, but they can just remind people, hey, stay safe, and just encourage them. They're looking out for people who are sleeping rough or homeless, who are not finding it comfortable to stay in a home or a guest house or something. They're looking out for them. They're looking to feed them. So they're doing a lot of things out there as street pastors. And then some of them are going out and they're volunteering with other charities because they can't go out. So they're doing things that are practical. The brilliant thing is everyone is doing something.
Yeah.
They're doing something. They're doing virtual street pastors. So they're encouraging their pastors, their friends, to do WhatsApp groups, and they're just sharing. They're sharing ideas. They're sharing food. They're sharing recipes. They're praying for people. They're talking about books, but they're encouraging people. There is hope.
Yeah.
You see? But in the midst of that, they are looking for the opportunity to explain to people what is it that really motivates them. Because let's be honest, if we are out there and we're doing all sort of great good works, and I think we should, and there's nothing of Jesus, then it becomes suspect. It really does. So it has to, as I said to people, is the word works and wonders. The word means Jesus is central to everything, that we do. Our personality, our characters, our kindness, our loving our neighbor, everything we do is about Jesus. Then we do the work. So we're practically demonstrating. And it was interesting. I was remembering there was a problem on my local street, and I had an email saying the street was going to meet at the local pub, 7 o'clock. So I came home and had my dinner, went over to the pub, and I walked in the pub, and my neighbor said, "Hey, Les, good to see you. Do you want a drink?" And, we were just there, about 50 people in this pub. And people were up in arms. They were uptight. There was a contractor, road contractor, the council, the councillors, and they were really screaming away, effing and blinding and everything. And I waited. And then I said, "Okay, ladies and gentlemen, look, this is how we're going to do it. First of all, we're going to write to the leader of council. We're going to ask to see the contractor. We're going to get the local councillors. Let's meet with them. Let's just relax for a moment. Let's have a conversation." 2 days later, we had a conversation outside my house. And one of my neighbors was leading on this conversation. And he said, "Look, we're good people. We're good people. We've even brought our priests with us," pointed to me. And it's interesting because obviously they've seen me. They've seen me. I wear a collar. I'm going to do all sorts of things. But, the amount of them who identified that I was their priest, their church, their minister on the street. So whenever there's issues, they ask me to chair it.
Yeah.
So for me, it's because they've seen something and because I've made myself available to them. And what we need to do at this time is making ourselves available to people, but just be sensitive for that opportunity to let them understand what makes us tick.
Yeah.
Right.
Can I interject there, Les, and just ask, because there'll be many people, like you said, through the church and outside of the church, through our communities, who are just going to such lengths and extent on it to serve the community, to serve need and so on. For Christians who are, as you said, whether it's with food banks or in WhatsApp groups or whatever, who are finding it relatively easy maybe to show that servant-heartedness, kind-heartedness, be collaborating with members of their community and showing Jesus in that sense, but actually really finding it really hard to clinch and grab that moment to use the words that come with the actions. From your experience and what you've shared with others before, what would your top tips, if you like, be as to how to unite those two, both actions but growing in confidence to find the words too?
It's interesting. We are living in a very discerning generation. Also, we're living in a very superficial generation. And people always want to know why you do what you do. They always do. And I think one of the greatest effects that we could have is just to tell our stories. You don't have to be any big preacher, any big minister. You're just ordinary person. And I see myself as an ordinary person. And I just meet people and I just talk. And I allow that opportunity. And I say to people, just allow the opportunity. You can't manufacture this. It will happen.
Yeah.
And you will find more often than not is the people say, "Well, why do you do this? Are you working? Do you volunteer? Why do you do this?" And that's the open question for you to say, "Well, actually, I really do this because of my faith. I go to the local parish church. I've been going there for 10 years. And, I go there and I really wanted to make my faith practical, because it's not about just heaven and going to meet angels and play harp in heaven. It's really about serving as well. And so, I'm serving because I know that Jesus has done this wonderful thing for me. And he has, in spite of all the situation, he gives me peace. And in those moments, a scripture will come to you, like the Lord is my shepherd. And what Jesus is, a real shepherd. And even though I go through difficulties, he just always seems to be there. Yes, I get anxious. Yes, I feel frustrated. Yes, sometimes I feel, I get uncertainty. But it's amazing all the time, Jesus gives that peace. And I say to people, let it be natural. Because when it's natural, it becomes authentic. And then people really warm to you. They may pause because, you think your word, you may think, well, I'm not J. John, I'm not so-and-so. But actually, Jesus is not looking for a second J. John. He's looking for you and I just to do that. And the impact that you could have is just incredible. Incredible.
Yeah, I guess think about my own life. Les, and the moments where I kind of knew faith was real when I saw the difference it made in other people's lives. Remember, as a teenager growing up, seeing people, seeing just ordinary people at my church who were doing things. And you think about my parents, my mum and dad. My dad was senior partner of a law firm. We could have lived in many houses in Birmingham, but chose to live where we live because he felt called here. And I think growing up, I saw the difference, where that Jesus made in my parents' lives. And I'm one of the reasons I follow Jesus today is I just saw that distinctiveness led to conversations. And the same true of, as you've been saying, I think about the conversations that I've had with mates over the years. It's often been those little distinctive actions, either by doing something positive and people say, why are you doing that? Or not by doing something that the world does and people ask, why aren't you doing that? And so the final question for you, Les, is if, I think so often, as I expressed at the beginning of tonight's program, really, that even if I don't feel like my life is making much of a difference, and even if I don't feel like I'm that non-anxious presence I want to be, how would you encourage people who don't feel like their life is very distinctive at the moment, and how would you kind of help them to understand it is really?
I would say to people, never trust your feelings, because here the Bible says we travel not by what we see or what we feel, but it's about by faith. I remember going to Exeter, and I was out with the street pastors there, and there was a lady in the team, and she was like a lollipop. She was like an ice cream. All the young people were gathering around her, and they were hugging her. They knew her by name. She knew people. They all were coming. The next morning I went to church, and she sat in church, and she was like a little mouse in that church. Looked insignificant. And I tell you what, I was shocked. I said to myself, the minister of this church, if he realized what he's got in his church, he could see that massive growth. And that woman is just an insignificant in our sight and in her church sight, but in God, she was phenomenal. To the people of Exeter, phenomenal. And I want to say to people, all of us have something to give. And the reason why we have something to give, because it's Christ in us.
Yeah.
In every believer, the hope of glory. Come on, get excited about it.
Come on, absolutely. We are. Great. Les, can I just
let's just allow the Spirit to work through us. And I tell you what, the greatest joy I have is to be able to just share my testimony or just tell somebody about Jesus. Wow.
Come on. Les, sadly our time is almost up, but just want to express just massive thanks for joining us tonight. Already seeing the comments kind of popping up and seeing people have found this so useful, so encouraging. And just, I think, reaffirms for all of us really, God's on the move during this time. It's a really exciting time for us to make the most of, but let's do that in the way we live our lives, in our actions, but also our words too. And I think we've been so helpful at helping us articulate what happens when people say, because people are interested in authenticity, aren't they? They're interested in why, the motives of why people are doing certain things. And I think that's really, really helpful. Thank you. Our challenge to you, if you're watching at home, this week, we always finish with a little challenge. Our challenge to you is to, how can you bless someone this week? How can, with your actions, in the middle of what is a really challenging time, it might be someone you don't know, but how can you bless a friend this week with something? That's our challenge to you. Think of a random act of kindness and go do it this week. And who knows what kind of conversation that might lead to.
Absolutely. Well, again, we just say thank you not only to Les, but to you for joining us this evening. Really hope that you feel encouraged by what you've heard there from Les, that not only as some of the comments came up, a few of you saying that actually it's reaffirming in you a sense of boldness and courage and the ability to step out. But also that we're in this together, aren't we? We're giving it a go. We're praying hard for our friends. And as Phil said, we take up the challenge to look as to how we can be used by God this week to bless those around us. So next week, we are really looking forward to having Miriam Swanson with us, Nace Swaffield. She's the global mission leader at Fusion, working with students. And what Miriam will be coming to share with us as we again carry on with the story bearer journey as well, is that actually to look at how we put a value on what our personal story is. I don't know about you, but so often for me in my upbringing, and I know for many others around, we as Christians so often downplay our own story. We think it's boring, that it's not worth sharing. And so what we'll be teasing out and chatting to Miriam about is actually how we put value on our personal story and how we connect that into the lives of others. So do join us for that. Phil will be back, won't we?
We'll be there.
Wednesday at 8 o'clock, we'll be there. Please do connect with us during the week. Do go to storybearer.com, connect with us on the Great Commission webpage, and also on Facebook here. Please leave us your comments as to how you're finding this, what you're engaging with, how hopefully it's encouraging you, and do share with us some of your top tips as well. So we'll say good night, God bless, enjoy your week, and we'll see you next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Take care. Bye.
God bless. Thank you.